All right, guys, I get so many questions in my DMs. We're gonna go through a DM today, and I'm actually going to encourage you guys to DM me more and more questions because we're gonna start a new series that we're calling the Daily DM. All right, guys, in this episode of the Daily DM, we're gonna go through a question that was asked to me from Jamari Ross. I'm gonna turn this onto a screen record so Freddie, my editor, can actually add this to the screen so you guys can see this as well. So Jamari Ross, Instagram name is J_dot_R, says, hey Pace, how are you doing? I've been watching your videos and podcasts for quite some time because I'm interested in doing creative finance deals. I'm a wholesaler out of Atlanta. Freaking love Atlanta, by the way, guys. I own a property in Ansley Park. I love Atlanta. I've never noticed that my deal flow has ultimately come to a stop, and I want to add creative financing to my tool belt. Super smart, Jamari. I was wondering, how do I come up with the terms on the seller side? I understand on a Subto you take over mortgage payments, but that is all that you're offering the seller. Also, on seller financing, how do you determine the end price of the deal, and for how long? Thank you for your time. What a great question. I love these types of questions. The challenge with these questions is they take so much time to answer. Obviously, I'm a mentor, I'm a coach, so I have my coaching program, Subto.com. So if you guys are interested in that, link down below. Where I spend 20, 30 hours a week educating my students on individual deals because every deal is a little bit different. So Jamari asked me this question, and my answer was this. I said, you should join my free creative finance Facebook group. And the reason why I suggested him to go that route is because I never want to push anybody to spend any money. I never want to encourage people to go and join my mentorship program unless it's a good fit for them. I, however, created a 16-hour live earlier this year where I recorded myself standing in front of my laptop for 16 straight hours talking nothing but creative finance. So Jamari, I send him the links. I encourage him to go join my Facebook group. And then he says, thank you for the content. I can only imagine how many of the same questions, the same messages with the same questions you get, so I appreciate your time. Guys, that's why we're doing the daily DMs, is because I do get these questions quite frequently. And I am going to answer this question for you guys here on the YouTube. The question essentially is this. Let me sum it up for you one more time. How do I come up with the terms on the seller side? So when I'm buying it from the seller, how do I come up with the terms? I understand on a Subto, you just take over the mortgage payments, but that is all you're offering the seller. Also on seller financing, how do you determine the end price of the deal? So what Jamari is asking is he's asking, when I acquire the property from a seller on seller finance, then how do I determine that price? Then how do I determine the price that I'm willing to sell the property to the end buyer? How do I basically play the middleman properly? Well, this is why I encourage you to go to my free Facebook group, link down below, is because there's 16,000 members in there, all aspiring to do creative finance. And out of those 16,000 members, there's 1,300 of them that are actual students of mine who listen to me 20 to 30 hours a week answering these types of questions. I would ask you questions back, Jamari. This is almost an impossible question to answer, but I'll do my best. Without knowing the conversation with the seller, without knowing their pain, without knowing what they're trying to accomplish, their timeline, or any of those things, I would say that every seller that I basically figure out the price is not the most important thing to me. My ability to cash flow is always the number one most important factor in structuring any deal. And what I mean by that is, let me ask you a question. Would you ever pay $1 million for a property that's only worth $100,000? Most people are going to say no, but you know I'm asking you the question and leading you down a path. So you're probably saying, should I say no? Let me ask you another question. Would you jump out of an airplane without a parachute for $100,000? The answer to that should definitely be no. However, we have not asked another question. What if I told you that the airplane was actually landed on the ground, it's on the tarmac and it never took off? Would you then jump out of the airplane with no parachute for $100,000? The answer is yes. Even if I broke an ankle, I'd do that for $100,000. My gosh. So it's the same thing with the property for $100 million that's only worth 100 grand. Would I buy it? So it's the same thing for the $1 million property that somebody's trying to sell you for $1 million that's only worth $100,000. In my life, would I ever pay that? Well, let me ask you a question back to the seller. Seller, would you make the payments worthy of my time in order to buy that property for $1 million? That's really the question you have to ask yourself. Now, let's say that I can take that $100,000 property and I can rent it out for $1,000 a month. What if the seller says, I'll sell to you for $1 million and I'll only take a $500 payment every single month? At that point, if I'm cash flowing $500 every single month, do I really care about the purchase price? The answer is no. Most multimillionaires like myself, are not living on the equity of our properties. We are living on the cash flow of those properties. Now, equity comes and equity goes, but at the end of the day, cash always flows. So the goal is to cash flow the property. Make sure that equity is definitely an important factor. I'm not saying that, but the first and foremost important thing to think about is, can I cash flow? So when I'm working with a seller, and they're seller financing a property to me, the way that I acquire that deal is based on my ability to rent it out or Airbnb it or group home or whatever my exit strategy is, and I work backwards. So let's say I know I can rent it out for $1,000. Well, my gosh, I know I want to make $500 a month. So I'm going to take that $500 out. That only gives me $500 to play with per month to go to the seller and say, I'll pay whatever price you'd like, as long as my payments are at this $500 or less. That's the answer to your first question. So we've answered the first part of Jamari's question. And what I'm learning about YouTube is that people really don't want to watch videos anything over 10 minutes long. So if you want more value, go to the free Creative Finance Facebook group, the same Facebook group I told Jamari to go to. Step 1. Step 2, if you want part 2 of Jamari's question, we'll be making a second video, which would be episode 2 of this. So I love doing this. I love talking creative finance. And if there's anything that you want to know, please make a comment down below. Please like, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I look forward to seeing you on episode number 2 of the Daily DMs.